D Silva is an advertising professional, poet, and author. With over 25 years of experience in the creative field, Raga has worked in senior positions in advertising in India and New Zealand and has been the recipient of several prestigious awards. Globally acknowledged as an expert on corporate speakers and B2B content creation, Raga is a sought-after speaker on the subjects of diversity, LGBT, building a personal brand, and doing business in India. As the South Asian ambassador for Diabetes UK and a social influencer, she has appeared on BBC, Sky TV, Channel 4, ITV, TVNZ to share her personal story and views to help prevent diabetes. She was the first woman to be elected on the board of the India-New Zealand Business Council and is currently a trustee on the board of CRY UK. Sandip Roy is a novelist and journalist currently living in Kolkata. His first novel, Don't Let Him Know, won the honor title for the Asian Pacific American Literature Awards in the US and the Likho Award in India, and was listed for other awards including the DSC Prize for South Asian Literature and the Green Carnation Prize. He has worked with the Huffington Post and has been a long-time radio commentator for National Public Radio in the US. He has been a senior editor with firstpost.com, and his journalism has appeared in the New York Times, The Guardian, Mint, BBC, and other publications. Nemat Sadat is the author of The Carpet Weaver and is the first native from Afghanistan to have publicly come out as gay and campaign for the LGBTQIA rights in Muslim communities worldwide. Sadat's novel has received rave reviews from The Hindu, Mint Life, Huffington Post, and several other publications. His first novel is fueled by what he has witnessed as a journalist and activist. He has previously worked at ABC News' Nightline, CNN Fareed Zakaria's GPS, and the UN Chronicle, and has earned 6 university degrees, including graduate degrees from Harvard, Columbia, and Oxford. He is currently working on his second novel. James Crabtree, an associate professor of practice at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, is a Singapore-based author and journalist. He is also a fellow at the school's Center on Asia and Globalization. His best-selling book, The Billionaire Raj, A Journey Through India's New Gilded Age, was shortlisted for the F.T. McKinsey Book of the Year. He's a columnist for Nikkei Asian Review and also a non-resident fellow at the Asia Pacific Program at Chatham House. James has written for a range of global publications, including The New York Times, The Economist, Wired, and Foreign Policy. He has also served as a senior policy advisor in the UK Prime Minister's Strategy Unit. Without further ado, let us please welcome our 4 eminent panelists up on the stage with a huge round of applause. Thank you.
Let me start with you, Nemat. You're in the middle, so many congratulations. So your book has just come out to wide acclaim. I mean, you got your introduction there. You're the first openly gay Afghan, but I wanted to start with the book itself. So it isn't set in the current moment, it's mostly set in the 1970s. And I wondered why you chose that as the setting for what is in a sense a gay coming-of-age story, and where you got the idea from. So for those who haven't read it, set the scene for us.
Yeah, you need a microphone. Thank you so much. That's a great question. I think what I wanted to do growing up as a member of the diaspora community in Southern California, the Afghan community, I just kept hearing story after story from my relatives and other members of the Afghan refugee population there about the good old days. Because see, my family's story is not one of the Horatio Alger myth that wherever you come from, you come to America, the city on the shining hill, this exceptional country, that your life will go from rags to riches. My family lived a life of prominence and prestige in Afghanistan. My mom was from the royal tribe, and my dad was from the religious elite, and he and 4 of my uncles joined the Communist Party. My other uncle was the governor of the central bank. And they went to Afghanistan, they went to Europe and the United States to regress in very menial jobs like taxi cab driving. And my mom, working like minimum wage jobs, and even, so until they got to learn the language. And so I inherited this culture, this rich civilization that I felt that was being negated and being erased, not just by Afghans, but by the rest of the world. even well-intentioned liberals who basically created this narrative that Afghanistan is this barbaric place, particularly after the September 11th terrorist attacks. It's a place of bachabazis and burqlas and bomb blasts, but it negated the 2,500-year-old civilization. You know, many Indians, particularly in Kolkata, Mumbai, and Delhi, from a certain age, I would say the baby boomer age, they know very well, the ones who are educated, well-rounded, and familiar with Afghanistan, they know the rich cultural heritage of Afghanistan. They know the cultural and historical ties between Afghanistan and India that predates the arrival of Islam in Afghanistan. You know, they know that Kandahar was Gandhara, which is considered the birthplace of Hinduism. They know that despite that India giving birth to Buddhism, some of the best monuments, the Buddhas of Bamyan, you know, in Logar province where the Chinese are excavating copper, some of the largest Buddhist, ruins are found there. So, and then the paganism, all of this rich heritage, I felt like this is the golden age of that paradise lost. And I needed to recapture it in order to create, because it's a coming of age story, not only of Kanishka Nurzada, a gay ex-Muslim, Maoist, refugee, and add on the identities, but it's really, I believe, the coming of age story of Afghanistan.
And so just, again, for those who haven't read it, tell us, just sketch the basic outline of the story, because there are some parallels, in a sense, of the story that you tell and the story that Sandip tells in his book as well.
Can you be a little more specific? Like, says parallels in terms of...
Well, no, don't talk about the parallels. I just want you to tell us about the two young lovers and the circumstances they find themselves in.
Yeah, the circumstance they found that, well, you know, I guess one of the inspirations for this book, I would say, is a funny by Shyam Selvadurai, which is really, I would say in South Asia, the first Bildungsroman that really went mainstream and gained some prominence. It was published in the late 90s, you know, around that time period. And he also, the author, went to Canada, went to North America like myself. So when I read Funny Boy, and it was recommended to me by Amal Chatterjee, my Oxford thesis advisor, and who grew up in this lovely city of Kolkata. And Amal's like, you gotta read Funny Boy, because he knew when I did I just entered Oxford and the creative writing program there, and we had to select a passage to read because all the students had arrived, and Amal's like, look, you gotta read Funny Boy. And I read it, and I was like, wow, this book has really helped me to shape, because it's a coming of age story set against the backdrop of the civil war between the Tamils and the Sinhalese. So I think that this is the backdrop of my book. Obviously, we transition from that golden age of that paradise lost that I capture to civil war, but we don't just have two groups. We have multiple groups at loggerheads, Shias and Sunnis and pro-Soviet communists of different factions versus Maoists. And we have, people who supported the CIA, people who supported the Mujahideen, many groups the country was beginning to factionalize. And what worries me, because what's happening with the Kashmir conflict, and particularly this citizenship law that's been enforced, and we see, kind of a lot of Indians are now reading Khushwant Singh's The End of India. And I think that they should also be reading The Carpet Weaver to see, what would happen if you go down that path and you splinter a country and factionalize it. It's very dangerous. I'm not trying to scare anybody in this room, but Afghanistan's been in war for 40 years, and I'm not trying to minimize this great civil society, this great country of India. But what I'm seeing right now is kind of what I'm seeing, and I wasn't even born at this time period, but obviously I lived through it in exile. When people are like, how did you write about Afghanistan when you weren't even born yet? Afghanistan was in my the Civil War, I lived through the Civil War. Other people read about it, I endured it. My mom refused to have me and my siblings raised in an Afghanistan of war and communism, and she kidnapped us against my father's will and took us to the United States.
And so you're right. One of the impressive things about the novel is the way that you set this coming-of-age story of the two male characters against the backdrop of Afghan revolution. But fast forward a bit and tell us, in a sense, so you started writing the book in 2008. You said it took nearly a decade to finish, so extra congratulations on that. But tell us what you decided to do in August of 2013, which I think that was the date that you did your Facebook post. And so tell people, in a sense, what you did and why you decided to do it.
Yeah. So August 22nd, 2013, I came out to the entire world on Facebook that I'm gay, Muslim, Afghan-American. I'm proud to be a gay Afghan-American Muslim. Sandip knows the little puns that I threw in there, like, you know, the funny things that I did. It was really kind of a slapstick comedy, really in your face. It's kind of like, oh, I'm sick and tired of all the aunties and uncles asking me when they're gonna, like, when I'm getting married and when I'm gonna bring a bride and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, if you're gonna ask me again, I'm gonna like pop up my ears, toss my hair, and ask you when are you gonna offer your nephews or your sons, and tell them I want it was a platinum ring wedding, a Manhattan skyscraper reception, and a Central Park wedding. So like it was and there was a lot more stuff, you can go read it. And then people got mad because like you cannot be gay and be Muslim. Muslims were telling me you can't be gay Muslim because in the Muslim faith homosexuality doesn't exist, and we don't accept it in Islam. That's what I was getting. And then militant atheists were telling me like, oh, you can't be gay Muslim because of the fact that you know, it's an oxymoron. It's like basically someone saying that I'm a proud Jewish Nazi. You know, it's like, you know, so it's like, you know what, I was tired of this. You know, this is the thing. It's like we live in a world of labels. This is also a book about identities. In addition to being a Künstlerroman, a coming of age about an artist, which is a subgenre of the Bildungsroman, in addition to being a romance, in addition to being a queer lit, in addition to being, it's also a clash of identities that, because that's what I grew up with, you know, having to reconcile myself, living, you know, one foot in Afghan culture, another one in American, one in Islamic culture, one in the West, having one foot, you know, living of the super rich and then of the super poor. I mean, how many people, when W.E. Du Bois talks about, you know, the double consciousness that he experienced as a black man, going to Harvard University, mingling around white people, being one of the first to get a PhD as an African American from Harvard University, and then realizing that, and then also having that identity as a black man, knowing the history of slavery and racism in the United States. So I've experienced it in a different way, you know, not necessarily less so by, I would say, race, because I think that it's more about, you know, the things that have been called by immigration, my experience with globalization, and just being a stranger in a strange land.
So Raga, may I turn to you? So you're here. I have Raga's book Untold Lies, also available in the bookshop. It's a very different sort of book. So Nemat's is a reasonably traditional novel. Yours is a mixture of short stories and poetry. And I wonder, I mean, maybe start right at the end, the final story, and use that to tell the audience a little bit about your own story and how you came to write this. Because although in a very different way from Nemat, you've also endured a lot of adversity in your life to come to the point where you decided to write this.
Thank you. Can I just make a comment first? I have been told that men typically speak 10,000 words a day and women speak 100,000. I think you broke my record. Okay, so thanks. So my book, I'll start at the end because the end of my book reveals my truth. And the book is called Untold Lies because it had to come out. Literally. It took me 15 years to speak my truth, and it took me 15 years basically to live a life where I had no fear. Now let me come back. Let me take you back, okay? So I'm a Catholic, minorities as you can see. So if Muslims are not allowed to be gay, then if you're a Catholic, you're not allowed to be gay as well in India. Then if you're a woman, then it becomes harder. Then if you're a married woman, then it even becomes even harder. Then you're married women with children, don't ask. So there was a night, and I'll give you a story now. This is 15 years ago. Remember, it is 15 years ago, it is not now. And 15 years ago, I lived in New Zealand, in a very progressive country, as you know, where being gay was celebrated. It wasn't looked down upon. And my marriage was already over, and we were towards the end of our marriage. I have twins who are now in their early 20s, And I was putting my twins to bed one night, and in the middle of the night, it was quite dark, and all I could hear was this sound, and I opened my eyes as I was putting the kids to bed, and I saw a silhouette of someone standing with a shiny thing in their hand. And that's one person that you want to feel safe with in our entire life, and that's our mother. And that night, my mother was standing with a knife in her hand and ready to plunge it in me because she had discovered my truth and she couldn't deal with it. And she cried, and there was drama, and she fought with me, and she said, I would rather you didn't live than live this truth. It was very hard for her. She couldn't understand it at all, and no matter how much I tried to explain to her, she couldn't understand. And her fears came from me being married, of course. At that time, I wasn't. My children were very little. She said, how would they survive? What will society do? And what will happen? And her fears were legitimate. I understood them. My ex-husband got to know about it because very quickly she made sure that he knew about it. We had lots of drama for lots of years, but over time he said, that's fine, I accept it. And in fact, over time, he supported me in my journey. He said, I will support you. And that was a very interesting twist to my life. My children who grew up in New Zealand had no idea, and they couldn't understand why there was a big fuss being made about you being who you were and living a life that you were meant to live anyway. But what I had realized over the last 15 years that I had started living a lie. When I went out to a grocery store once, I just give you that story, in New Zealand, I was at a grocery store, and you know most of the grocery stores around the world are run by Gujaratis. So I went to the Patel grocery store, and as I went in, there was this woman, I still remember her face, short little woman, tiny, wearing a sari. She came to me, and I had my two little kids who were at that time about 5 years old. She came to me, and she just pushed me. And I remember falling right behind with all the stuff falling on my head. Then she came very close to me. She tried to kick me, and she spat on my face. And my children were crying. They didn't know what was going on. And she said, you homebreaker. And I just was shocked. I said, whose home did I break? If anything, I broke my own home. You know, and I didn't even break my own home. But I realized very quickly that we have a problem. We Indians had a problem. No matter where we went, we took our prejudices and our own fears with us. And I shut down. Very quickly, I decided I wasn't going to tell anybody who I was. I lived this life. I met my partner 13 years ago. We've been together in a very successful, I'll say, relationship, brought up our two children. They're just regular children. When people ask me, how are your kids? I say they are just as dysfunctional as yours, you know? Just normal kids. Just because two women bring them up doesn't mean they're going to be anything special. So anyway, so that was the reason I wrote my book, and my book is a story about what happens in the end, is I come out and I say, and one day I fell in love. It was a woman, and I know that I would be forever judged.
There we go. Yeah. So and so the final story in the New Zealand nightclub is the meeting. But tell us a little bit about the form that you decided to write in. So it's an unusual mixture. You call it a storium, right? So can you explain, in a sense, why you ended up writing it in this quite unusual style?
See, for you it is unusual. For me it isn't. Sorry. It's like people calling me normal versus, oh, you live a normal life or abnormal life. For me it is normal. Who I am is normal. So when I think differently, I realized that long ago. It's only now I've started celebrating that difference. So my book is a concept called storioms that I've coined, which is stories that become poems. So each of my story, they turn into poems. So even if you read a poem, you would find a story in it. Then another chapter is another story, which turn into poems. So it's just simple. It's just different thinking.
Very good. Sandip, can I ask you about Don't Let Him Know? So your book came out 4 years ago now, so unlike the two debutantes here, it bears some comparison with The Carpet Weavers. Although it's set predominantly in, well, California and here in Kolkata, it involves a story of two young men who endure adversity, and in the end, things end up somewhat unhappily. I mean, can you tell us how you came to the story? You know, what was the inspiration for it? You were obviously living in California at the time, and so it sort of tells the story of your own culture, but where did the specific idea come from? Why don't you try the other one, which looks like it's working?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, James, sometimes it's always hard to tell where stories come from, because they come, little bits and pieces come to you, and then at some point you realize you're holding the strands of some larger story. And interestingly, I did not, when I started writing this, and this is a book written in short stories, no poems, but just the stories. And it's a novel written in short stories about the same characters over a course of time. And I was actually not so interested in the fact that there was a gay character possibly at the center of it. I really just wanted to write a book about secrets, because I thought that all of us lived with so many secrets around us all the time, and even people whose lives seem so placid on the surface. I was like a very, what in Bengali we say, bhalo chele, a very sort of good, obedient boy, the kind who did his homework. I cut my little side parting to my hair when I still had more hair, and even won a bloody thing called a good conduct medal in school, which is sort of like the endless albatross around your neck. So long and short of it is like, I was sort of this model boy, but I knew I had a secret that I couldn't talk about with the rest of the world, which in my case might be around sexuality. But when you looked around, you realized people around you were all carrying secrets all the time, and sometimes those secrets were actually delicious. People savored them. It was maybe a memory of an illicit kiss or a little affair that you had with someone, and that kept you going through the drudgery of the rest of your life. And so I thought, I wanted to write a book about secrets, all kinds of secrets. So one character happened to have the secret was sexuality, and it was a terrible secret because the person had got married, and so it was a corrosive secret in the thing. But then I thought, like, what if the wife discovers this secret about her husband? What then does she do with that secret in that time? Where does she find support? Will she just live with that secret? And I remembered somebody once told me that in our cultures, you don't really come out. When you come out to your family, it's really your whole family goes into the closet with you. So it just becomes a big closet in which we all share. Because the whole point, as soon as you come out, is people say, but don't tell anyone. They say, but people will know, and then the secret will be out. And then I also had in the story a great-grandmother who is supposed to be vegetarian, like a good Hindu widow, but who likes to eat fish. That's her secret. And in that case, too, the family has to navigate on who gets to know that secret or not. And I wanted to write a book that was about the secrets we carry, and then the ripple effects of those secrets on our lives, the lives of people around us, and over time. And so in the book, oddly, for a book which has a central character who's a gay character, I actually never really have a proper coming out story about him. Yeah, I have a story where he realizes his sexual attraction to men, but I don't show him as an adult, doing the binary I'm coming out. And
You're talking about Sandip here, or which character?
The Sandip is the one who wrote the book. He's not in the book at all. In fact, if people haven't read the book, people often assume because of sexuality that, I must model the gay character after me. Actually, the character that's closest to me is the most boring character in the book, which is the son of the couple, who is the good boy who goes and studies computer science and goes abroad. His life story is the most bland and probably follows mine most.
And so can I ask you, I mean, in a sense, all three of your stories have a kind of cosmopolitan element. All of you have moved between different cultures. And I suppose it occurred to me in reading your book, Sandip, whether, in a sense, the diaspora fiction had become a vehicle for LGBT fiction, whether it was sort of to be expected that by moving to other cultures that these books about living in different places would also be the vehicle with which these subjects were being raised.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a good point there. There used to be a phrase, you know, James, a long time ago, where people were called passport princesses. And that meant that they went abroad, then they were marching in gay pride parades in New York and San Francisco. But when they lived in Kolkata and Mumbai, they would not let a hint of their sexuality be visible to anybody else. But it is true that for a long time, a lot of LGBT activism did start out with the diaspora. The first anthology of South Asian LGBT writing was a book called A Lotus of Another Color, when lotus had not been yet appropriated by any particular political party. And it came out from a press in Boston called Allison Press, edited by an Indian Canadian, actually from Georgia, named Rakesh Ratti. So that was the first, and it came out in the 80s. The first South Asian LGBT group, which I was involved with when I was in California, was a group called Trikon. And it was started by two Indian engineers out of IIT. Yes, IIT produces, among other things, gay people too. And they went to America, and then they started a group in the diaspora because they wanted to find people like themselves. You know, they were tired of being the only Indian in the gay club and the only gay at the Diwali function, and they wanted to bring their lives together. And the first issues of Trikon, which used to be mailed for free in India, were all photocopied at night. One of them worked at Hewlett-Packard, and so at night he would go and he would photocopy this magazine, and to this day, HP has no idea about the sort of cameo role it has played in the South Asian LGBT movement. But so it is, you know, and so that's where people often went, where they felt that they could finally be somewhat free and a little more anonymous and be able to express themselves. Now it's an entirely different story in this country.
I mean, I suppose I want to ask all three of you about where LGBT fiction and non-fiction has reached in India. You know, it seems like progress is being made. You have the repeal of Section 377. You have LGBT festivals now. So let me begin with you, Nemat. So in your book, your characters in the 1970s talk about India as this sort of sunlit upland, a place of freedom and expression, very different from Afghanistan. And yesterday you were talking, and you're on a huge book tour of South Asia, 50 cities. Your book was published here first by an Indian agent. And I wonder if you, given we're in front of an Indian audience, can you say a little bit about how you view the acceptance of LGBT writing in India in particular, because you were very positive about it yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing because, you know, this is not the first LGBTQ novel that has been written in India, but it came at such a right time. You know, it's like I really focus on creating a high concept novel, but also having a book reach the market being timely and relevant. When we signed the deal, within 2 weeks, the Indian Supreme Court made a ruling on Section 377, which legalized LGBTQ people in this country. And basically hit the market last Pride Month. So it came at a very good time, but you know, what's interesting is that before the depictions, both in film and literature, in India, and I would say in South Asia and generally, was kind of ancillary. You know, we've kind of like, LGBT people were kind of puns, like the movie Dostana, you know, which is like making fun of them, and they not, still treating them as second-class citizens. And I think what's really generated a lot of excitement with the community is like, wow, this book, even though none of the characters are Indian, but this is the main home for the carpet weaver, the first home. Of course, it would never be published in Afghanistan at this time because I'm not even welcome, being a gay ex-Muslim. How are they going to allow this fiction to be allowed there? I was rejected 450 times by literary agents in the United States and UK and other countries in the West because they said there's no literary merit or market potential for the carpet weaver. I reached out to Kanishka Gupta from the writer's side in New Delhi, and just one agent pitched to him, and he responded back within 48 hours saying, please send me your full manuscript. And after that, another 48 hours after that, he conferred with his team, and they said that we want to represent you for South Asia rights or worldwide rights, and the rest is history. And he helped me to get an agent in the US who basically tried to get this published there, and then that didn't work. And then even I tried to get another agent on my own in the UK, and that didn't work. So that was another about 50 more. So now the number is about 500 rejections, which is like worldwide. I broke the record, the Guinness Book of World Record of rejections, which is kind of cool actually, because I think the number was 472, and I'm like, and we're still going to get rejections. So, and it's really sad because even now, thanks to everyone in this room and in this country, the Indian readership has proven that this book does have market potential. It does have literary merit. This was the most written about debut fiction last year, in terms of, for the whole year, in terms of author profiles and book reviews, which has unanimously been very positive. And in terms of, we're now on our third print run, and it's sold almost 7,000 copies for a hardback, for a debut novel. So thank you, India. So that's why I find
a few more after that, I think. So, Raga, I mean, so you come from a slightly different perspective. We were talking about this again yesterday. So, as lesbian fiction, in a sense, I think plays slightly second fiddle to male authors. Well, so you're saying slightly. So, I mean, say a little bit about how you perceive that. So, viewed from outside India, maybe within South Asia, India seems to be a kind of bastion of freedom of expression, particularly recently. But what has been your experience as a woman beginning to kind of enter this world of writing?
I have never, ever read any lesbian fiction. I have to go and look for it. But my friends who have read have said to me that most of the fiction is of sexual nature. All the content is sexual. In fact, you are what you represent anyway, right? In the country like India, for instance, we talk about Section 377, which you just alluded to. Section 377 is basically just about saying that, hey, now you have my permission to have sex. So that's all that is. If I had to, and I'm digressing, but if I had to go and get school admission for my children, I still haven't got that permission. I can't I can't put my partner's name on the school admission form, or I cannot get a bank loan. I can't buy a house with my partner. So basically, I just don't exist. My relationship, my marriage, my 15 years of partnership with my partner doesn't exist at all as per government. So the fiction also basically depicts that in India. So if you try to look for something, because they don't understand anything, they will sexualize everything that is related to being gay or being a lesbian. And that's why I wrote this novel, and my next book that I'm writing is going to purely be about the intelligence, the knowledge, the information about having a regular relationship. The other thing that we spoke about yesterday, that in India, we are talking about the elite, 1% of us who can sit here with an audience like you, wonderful audience, thank you, and talk about being gay and be accepted. There are millions and millions of Indians who don't even know that it is normal to be this person. And that is the audience that I actually want to talk to. So my next book is going to be, although in English, I'm getting it translated into languages so that it can reach those grassroots levels. I don't want gay content to be about being just sexual content. I want it to be about being real stories and giving people the courage to say, hey, this is who I am, at least the insight inside themselves. We hide from it so much. And that is, I think, what we require, a book and a film, and not dostana.
I mean, Sandip, do you watch the... more applause, come on, more applause for the panel. I mean, you watch the literary scene in India very closely. I wonder how you see it changing, I mean, probably not as a direct result of 377, but I mean, the point that's being made here is that to the extent that there is LGBTQ fiction in South Asia, it is predominantly urban, predominantly upper caste, and predominantly male. And I wonder if you see that beginning to change as you look around the kind of books that are being published and the kind of voices that are being heard. Other one. Yeah.
I think one thing that the end of 377 meant was that a lot of people were suddenly looking for gay everything. You know, gay was sort of the new flavor of cool, as it were. So people were, you know, so everybody was suddenly, you know, all magazines and things wanted to do gay this, gay that, gay travel, gay destination. You know, it was like somebody had just, it was, people had discovered the pink rupee, as it were, which is wonderful. You know, it's wonderful to be sort of flavor of the month as opposed to, you know, being lynched or discriminated against. I'm all for positive discrimination. So as a result, one of the things that has happened, definitely, is that there's a lot more interest among publishers and stuff to look for narratives that have some gay content in there, say, because, not necessarily because they think there's an enormous market, but they think there's interest in the subject. We have panels like this. I mean, I remember years ago going to a panel at the very venerable Jaipur Literature Festival, and it was, you know, so there was like the gay panel, but it was literally the Love That Dare Not Say Its Name panel, so they changed its name. It was no longer called the gay panel. It was called something about like forbidden stories or taboo topics or something like that. And, but all of that has changed. So there's definitely more interest. But I think it is still going to be exceptionally hard to get out of the gay male story. Will still have a lot more easier access to agents, to market than when you come when you're presenting a lesbian story. But some changes are happening. I recently read a book that's coming out called Fern Road, which is about boys coming of age, but it is actually much more of a transgender kind of story. It's about a boy realizing that he might actually be she in a set in Kolkata right now. There are memoirs that have come out of in India, Manobi Bandyopadhyay, the first transgender school college principal, and things like that. So there are a lot of different presses out there, and so there is certainly some interest in it. But you're absolutely right in the sense is that, you know, you want to see that there, when you, like, even among so-called alternative voices, you really have to make a conscious effort to find diversity there and not just think that because you published this one gay coming out of story, you've ticked the gay box and that, you know, you're done.
Do you want to come back in here?
Yeah, may I just add here? Yeah? See, in India, and I think it is, I'll say predominantly in India, I'm sure it's in the rest of the world as well, there is something called male entitlement. So, and then gay men are men as well. So you're doubly entitled. Whereas women, we really struggle. I think there will be a time, maybe one day we'll also become lesbians. I hate that word, by the way. We'll become fashionable and then maybe we will be entitled as well. But in our country, it is very difficult for a woman anyway to voice her opinion. And then I think the lesbian fiction, the gay fiction, it's going to be a long way away for us to get our rights here.
Nemat? Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. I think that you're right, like the Harlequin romance, like the kind of gay erotica, which we see a lot in common in the Western countries, that's something that I did not want to write. I wanted to write a story to attract and appeal to mainstream heterosexual people. Actually, I saw what Brokeback Mountain did. Annie Proulx wrote the short story, and once it became a movie and released in 2004, we saw state after state in the United States supporting gay rights, and the attitude started changing. It swept over the country. Like gay marriage was like with the country, the vast majority of the country. Before Brokeback Mountain was against, gay marriage. And then within a couple years, it just blew up. And it's not just the United States, the entire Western world. So I wrote a story. I said, you know what? I'm going to write a book that's going to attract. It's not just going to be like this, the little gay novel. I want somebody to really respect this novel and treasure this novel and love this novel just as they would any other novel. And so I wanted this to change the mindset of the world and to be a catalyst for changing the attitudes of homosexuality and promoting gay marriage in Asia.
And so, this begs the obvious question. I'll open it up for questions in just 1 second, but what has been the reaction to the novel so far in Afghanistan as opposed to here in India?
Very good question. I get messages constantly from people telling me, when is this book coming? I've gotten nothing but love bombs from Afghanistan, which is a stark contrast from when I came out. After, one thing you asked from your previous question, I returned back to Afghanistan in 2012 to teach as a professor of political science. And at that point, I was persecuted for being a lapsed Muslim and being a practicing homosexual. And during that time, it's like I struggled. And when I left the country, I tried to promote LGBT rights underground. When I left the country, that's when I came out. And at that time, I received tsunamis of hate, curses, death threats, a fatwa against me. But since this book came out, I received nothing but love. And in Afghanistan, don't believe what you think. Yet Afghanistan is a country under Sharia law. The people are devoutly Muslim, but the unofficial religion is Bollywood. So now that Shobha Day has made this, has endorsed this book, and Sonali Bendre has chosen this last October for Book of the Month, and other Bollywood celebs are touting the carpet weaver. Now it's like, oh, well, we can't be against him because now Bollywood has approved him.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please.
One of the things, when I wrote the book, I honestly did not have any intention, I didn't want the book to in any way be a role model or a catalyst for change or anything, or, I change, because you're right, Brokeback Mountain did do a lot, but it was written by a woman named Anne Prue, and her intention was not activism. I just wanted to tell a story about, and mostly not even about a gay man, I wanted to tell the story of the woman he was married to. And when the book came out, I remember in 2015, I felt, even though I hadn't set it in a particular time period, I felt like, India has moved on a lot since the time that this book is about, where this man is coming of age sexually and has no idea where to find other people like him. There was no internet, there were no apps, there was nothing out there. And I thought, in a way, maybe the book feels a little dated. And then just months after the book came out, there was an incident that happened in Delhi that really shook me at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. 2 doctors married to each other, this young man and this woman. This young woman committed suicide. And she committed suicide because she discovered that the man she had married was having gay affairs on the side, and he had promised to stop. He'd promised to stop, and he kept kept going back to. And so eventually she killed herself. And I remember reading so much coverage that said, in this day and age, why did she not just divorce him? Why did she have to kill herself? And I remember just thinking, why is nobody saying, why in this day and age, why did he have to get married? Nobody was asking that question. And so I realized that even as much as things change, a lot really doesn't change at all.
Very good. Now, I promised that we'd end at 7:45. I know you probably have dinner to go to, and we don't want to get in the way of your dinner, but does anyone have a question from the audience? So we have a I'm going to take time for just a couple. So there's one right at the front, and then I saw the lady in the red hat. So let's, sir, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you. So firstly, thank you so much for your time. So as a gay man, I struggle, as a queer man I should say, I struggle a little bit with the desire to be part of the mainstream. Of course, buying a house and registering your children in school is important. It's fundamental to living. But I struggle a little bit with like, hey, look how much of a model human being I am. Like, I have a steady relationship. I drive, I follow all the traffic rules, etc. And when you use fiction as an instrument to battle oppression, I wanted you to talk a little bit about how you can use our imperfections as queer folk to also sort of help people empathize with us. A Picasso can be a terrible man and still be famous. Like, can someone who's queer also, or maybe not?
Who wants to dive in on that? Nemat?
Well, I love that question. I'm so glad you asked that. First of all, I want to say that, in my novels and the subsequent novels I want to write, LGBTQIA people will always be in leading roles. They will, and they will be in leading roles, and they will LGBTQIA themes and identities. But one of the things I do want to say that this book started a conversation. It mimics what you're saying, that there's a new conversation started here in India between, I'm an ex-Muslim, so people who had left their religion, who are members of the LGBTQIA community, but are atheists or agnostic or just do not believe in their religion that they were born up in, but they felt rejected, they felt marginalized by other LGBTQIA people who have to reinforce that, oh, I'm gay Muslim, yeah, but I'm a really good devout Muslim, or I'm a really good Hindu, or I'm a really good Sikh. And in order to get sympathy, in order to get acceptance, in order to feel like they're part of that community. And they said they're really happy to see a character that is not only gay, but as somebody who's actually very vocal that they're a disbeliever of their religion, because we haven't seen something like that from literature from this area. And I think that they said that this was a new dialogue that started now between within the LGBTQIA community. There's still a lot of problems within the community. Like we talked about, like transgender people feeling marginalized by cisgender people, women by men, and within racial caste, class issues, there's also, particularly this one, within the faith groups. People who are belonging to the faith feel like they have to continuously seek this acceptance, and people who have exited the faith, they feel like that the media, that the broader mainstream society is like pushing them into the back burner, or like kind of sweeping them under the rug, or not interested in them, or like dismissive of them. And it's very dangerous, especially now, because secularists in this country are under threat, regardless of what they believe in.
Now let's have one more question, Bachi. Oh, sorry. Mic's not on. Let's see.
Nemat touched upon this briefly, and so did Raga, that there is a kind of patriarchy even among when it comes to males and females, and then we're just looking at that binary. But across, now that we have LGBTQ plus, and so what is the caste system that's operating over there? Is it the male homosexual who's at the top of the pyramid, the transgenders at the bottom, and I mean, I know that the community puts up a big front versus the rest, but within the community, isn't there a lot that you still have to answer for in terms of caste discrimination?
Raga, Sandip, do you want to pick this up? Sandip, then Raga, then we'll close.
Always. I mean, well, first of all, fundamentally, like, we are Indians, we will always fight amongst ourselves. I lived in America, and it was the common joke was that if there were like 4 Bengali families in the area, there would be 3 Durga Pujas, because they just don't get along with each other. But of course, there is the caste, it's not just caste. Here we often talk about that, it's about class rather than caste, but those things are not entirely separate. So I think that within the community, there's enormous tensions and rifts between not just through caste, but about language, about like who is the English fluent person as opposed to the vernacular gay, the metro person versus the small town person, and people will cut you down witheringly and put you in your place. There are like cliques within cliques going on. So obviously, yes, the community has lots and lots of cracks in fissures that it needs to deal with. But yes, once when you're at a Rainbow Pride Parade, when everybody marches together, it is a wonderful sight. And perhaps in the backdrop, there's been lots of backstabbing and fighting, and that's gone on. But I think as long as the community is aware that you somehow have to pull it all together, it still, hopefully, I feel it moves forward.
Raga?
I'm going to add two things to this. One is that we love labels, of course. I mean, that's something that we live with. I've noticed that all we need is a voice. I think the gay men are at the top of the hierarchy right now because they have a lot of voice there. And I think I'm going to say women like me need to come out, and that's why I made this choice, conscious choice of being the voice. And there are a lot of women. I think the more people come out in the transgender community, the more people come out, the hierarchy will change. And I don't think it has to be about who's on top and who's at the bottom. It needs to be about standing together like this and holding hand and saying, hey, let's do this together. That's one. Two is, I have hope. My children who are 22, I have twins. My daughter, who lives in London, she grew up in New Zealand. And I had this conversation with her the other day when she put up a Facebook post of a friend of ours, who's a little boy who grew up with them, wearing a pink shirt, orange tuxedo, beautiful green pink hair. And he was just standing, he was at his convocation graduation ceremony. And I said, wow, I said, Anna, is Kiran going to come out finally? And she just looked at me in disbelief and she said, why would he need to come out? This is who he is. He doesn't need to come out. She said, it is you, Mama, your generation that needs to come out and talk to the world about it. We don't need to. That gives me hope.
Very good. Well, look, that's a nice note to end on. I know that a couple of you, I'm really sorry, but we've run out of time, so our panelists will stick around and answer any more questions that you have. But please give my panelists one more warm Kolkata round of applause. Thank you very much, all three of you. That was a great discussion, and we'll hand back over to our host for the evening. So.
Thank you so much, James, for moderating such a beautiful panel and having such